my body, I do have routines around cleaning my mind too. Hi and welcome to the vlog. This is going to be a very weird, different one. But I do mention here and there that I do kind of like CBT with myself, and I do like self-therapy here and there when I can, and I get a lot of questions on what I do specifically and what are the exercises that I do and how I reset myself to show you exactly what I do to kind of reset myself when I need it. So let's get started. Let's get chatting, shall we? Let's talk about CBT. This is really cool. I'm excited about this. By the way, I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't know how to describe this. It's just something that I've tried again and again, but I'm definitely not an expert in. But basically, CBT is a form of kind of therapy. I think it's a combination of talking therapy, but it's a very active and proactive form of dealing with your issues and your problems. And basically, it's part of, all of the things that we try to do in therapy to try to help someone feel better. And the reason that I particularly like CBT is that you don't necessarily need a therapist to do it. At least, of course, I wish I had a therapist all the time, but that's just not feasibly possible because it's quite expensive and it's kind of difficult to access or get in line. Having therapy in the past, I've taken my CBT exercises and they're things that I do by myself all the time, so they tend to be very, very helpful for me. So yeah, it's just a kind of an empowering way of viewing your life and viewing your world. So the kind of exercises and ways of thinking and frameworks that I used in CBT are during therapy themselves are things that I use by myself again and again. And basically how it works is, I'm sure there's various different ways, so I'm just going to discuss not even the things that I particularly did in therapy because I don't remember all of them, but I'm going to discuss the ones that I'm going to be doing today and the things that I kind of do whenever I tend to kind of feel like I'm spiraling or not feeling too well. So they tend to be basically exercises and frameworks to approach anything happening in my life and how I organize that into something that is more effective, a better way of viewing it perhaps, and in a way that will change my thoughts, will change my behaviours, and will change my approach to things, and will hopefully mean that I have a better experience overall. So I think the first thing that I wanted to address is, when do you know that you need therapy, or when do you know that you need kind of help, or when do I know, for example, that I need to take time out? And at least for me, there's two times. One is when it's blatantly obvious, and that's either when I feel extremely low for a long amount of time, or if I'm crying a lot, or if I'm just having a really bad experience in general. And I'm sure everyone knows what this feels like, when you just feel bad, when you feel like saying that you're depressed, even though that's kind of technically a diagnosis, but when you feel like saying, I'm depressed, I'm low, I'm unhappy, I think those are the cases when I know that, okay, we need to intervene here because things are not okay. But the other time is sometimes I feel, and this is a new one for me because I didn't realize that this was a problem before, if that makes sense, and that is when I have kind of unreasonable reactions to things that are happening in my life. So what I mean is, for example, if there is a situation, or if I am having a conversation with someone, or if something happens to me and I have an overreaction, and it doesn't need to be an extreme reaction because I'm not someone who tends to get very angry, for example, so it doesn't have to be like that. But if even in my internal states I feel extremely low, or extremely triggered, or extremely vulnerable, or extremely scared, or kind of extremely insecure, if something happens in my life that is a small action but triggers a huge reaction by proportion in me, I realize that I'm carrying something that has not been dealt with, and I'm bringing something else to the conversation. So what I mean, for example, is that, let's say someone said, hey Elizabeth, I'm going to cancel our dinner tomorrow. If a friend of mine said that, and my reaction was to start crying, or my reaction was to feel as though, feel extremely sad and feel abandoned and feel as though this friend doesn't like me and they must hate me therefore, or they must not want to be friends with me any longer, or I'm just not funny, I'm not interesting. These are thoughts that I've had in the past when an action like this has happened, and these, I think we can all agree, are out of proportion to the action itself. The action of someone cancelling dinner could mean simply that they just didn't have time, or they had to rearrange something, or they just didn't feel like engaging with someone else. And if I'm taking that personally and kind of feeling really, really abandoned and feeling really miserable and feeling horrible, it probably means that I'm carrying things from my past and bringing these other assumptions to the table, entering these assumptions of my own into the conversation and the interaction that are leading to a terrible experience on my part, which is just not there. And I think that's when I realize, when I have out of proportion reactions, that I probably have issues that I haven't dealt with. And I think it's quite good that once in a while, I tend to do this as often as I can, I kind of reevaluate what assumptions I carry in life, because by doing that, I think I get to kind of deal with my issues as they're arising rather than let them accumulate. And I think it's completely impossible to be like 26 years old and to not have issues. It's just not possible. Things happen in life. And if we're not dealing with them kind of constantly, if we're not doing some spring cleaning, and I like to use the word mental hygiene because this is what I call it. I call it, like, in my mind, it's mental hygiene. It's, you have routines around cleaning your body. I do have routines around cleaning my mind too, and making sure that, one, I address issues that are really, really deep-seated, and those I tend to do with a therapist. So when I had and I still have, I don't think you ever get rid of them fully, but I had deep-seated issues from my childhood, and those are things that I have addressed in therapy and potentially will still address in therapy in the future. So those are kind of the ingrained problems in my life. And then as I go forward in life, things will happen all the time. There will be micro kind of conversations, or micro rejections, or micro failures, or kind of micro angers and micro hurts that I'm just accumulating every single day, and they are potentially subconsciously building this narrative in my mind that can be not so good, and these narratives can be grandiose, can be like, I'm an incredible person, I don't deserve the things that are happening to me, or these narratives can be very negative in the sense of I'm unworthy, this is why these things are happening to me. Mine tend to be on the negative end of the spectrum, which means that my default state tends to be that of quite low self-esteem, and I tend to blame myself for a lot of things that are happening in the world and in my life, which is not necessarily true. And I know that I carry assumptions in my mind, or at least I have carried assumptions in my mind in the past, that I am kind of not a very good person, or I'm not a very clever person, I'm not a very beautiful person, I'm not a very funny person, I'm not a very interesting person, and therefore I don't deserve good things. And I think that I'm going into this long rant. Sorry, this is going to be a long video. You know what? I'm just going to put this video out the way that it ends up being. So I've taken this time out to kind of reevaluate where different things stand in my life and see why I'm behaving and why I'm feeling the way that I am, and what kind of underlying assumptions do I have behind that. So that's what's going to happen. I don't know why my food is not here yet, so I'm really keen on getting the food here as soon as possible, and then we're going to do the exercise. So yeah, let's do that soon. I'll try to put together a Notion template too, just in case you want to download it that way, so it makes a bit more sense. But I'm going to go through the logical flow of what I do when I try to kind of lower my anxiety and do self-CBT and kind of organize my thoughts and what I'm thinking. So let's go through it together. Okay, let's start. The first thing that I do is I create a long list of things that I'm thinking about at the moment. And this is kind of like a brain dump, and I write literally everything. It's a combination of anything that's on my mind. It can be something that I haven't done yet, a to-do list, or something really, really broad, like a common anxiety that I've been having over the last few days, or anything that I've been thinking or pondering or like stressing over. So everything basically goes down here. One thing that I like to use as a prompt for this, and this is going to sound awful, but I like to think of the things that make me feel as though I'm being punched in the gut. Like, what are the things that just make me feel like, oh, this, if you've ever had anxiety or dread or something like that, or if you've ever been like overworked or like really, really stressed with things that you're doing, you know that feeling that just comes from your gut as though something is being like wrenched out of you and or punched into you. So those are the sort of things that I use as a prompt, like what in the last month or the last few months has been making me feel as though I'm being punched in the gut. And I will just write down a list of this whole thing. And once I have this like complete brain dump, I will do is then turn it into two categories. So on one side, on one list, I'm going to put the things that are tasks, so a to-do list sort of situation, and on the other side I'm going to put things that are kind of like to process. So I create a to-do list and a to process list. On a to-do list go things like if I have kind of deadlines or stresses over work, if I have things that I need to kind of organize, if I have things that I need to think about, like things like this YouTube channel, my podcast, my job, my course, my other job, the videos I need to film for work, and the slides that I need to prepare, and the things that I need to do and organize, and going back to university and organizing university, having to move house. All of these things will go into my to-do list because they're literal actions that I need to do. And so then everything that is left becomes a to process list. And this means it's kind of like something that has to more of an effect or some way that I feel, and an effect of something that I've been going through or something that's happened to me recently. That will go into my to process list. Now with a to-do list, this tends to be the easier thing to do because I will structure things with order of importance, because sometimes there's just too much. And I know there's so many exercises that say just write down all the list of the things that you want to focus on and then just pick 3 and delete all the rest. I cannot afford to do that, unfortunately. So I will try to leave this to 3 or 4 things, and then I'll say, for example, I'm not going to continue my podcast for a while, or I'm not going to do my course for a while, or I'm not going to do this aspect of my job for a while, because I just can't do all this right now. So this tends to be the list of things that I can either leave for later, or say that are the top list of importance, or the bottom list of importance, or anything in between. So that will be my to-do list, and that's sorted. Not too interesting. The most interesting thing is the to process list, and this tends to be all of my beliefs, all of my anxieties, all of my worries, all of my kind of concerns, all the things that I potentially want to say or do or haven't done, or just things that are brewing in my mind, and kind of just all the awfulness that creates that low-key anxiety or kind of like depressive feeling inside me. So this will go into my to process list, and I will just write all these things down together, and then I will group them, and they will go into categories depending on kind of what they are talking about. So is this a body image issue? Is this a self-esteem issue? Is this a I don't want to go into detail onto what mine are, but it tends to be things in these sort of categories. And for example, love category, family category, friendship category, loneliness category, kind of worthiness category. So I tend to group these depending on what the kind of belief is, if that makes sense. So they tend to fall into themes. And once I have these themes, this time around I had 5 themes. And once I have 5 different themes, and these are just one word, so it can be like love, or it can be a person, or it can be a belief, or it can be just a topic in general. These tend to be 5 things. And then what I will do is I will start my theory A, theory B. Now theory A, theory B is something that my therapist taught me like 2 years ago. And it was really, really helpful at the time, and I still use it now for so many different things, not for what it was originally used for on me. And basically what theory A, theory B is. Theory A is the belief that you are the assumption that you are functioning under. And this is super important, because theory A, it really gets down to the core of what are the assumptions with which you are living. If I say that consciously, I believe that I deserve happiness, right? This is something that I believe. However, if I see that I am consciously doing things or not doing things in order to self-sabotage myself, and in a way kind of make myself not be happy, and if I keep doing this consistently, it means that actually I'm functioning under the true assumption that I am not worthy and I don't deserve happiness. And that is the core belief. So that's theory A. And even theory A tends to be like a very extreme stance, but it's the one that, even though you wouldn't want to say out loud, and once you say it, you know it's ridiculous, you actually believe it, because that's the theory with which you're functioning. So if I have core beliefs, the theory A's of like, I am extremely ugly, or if I say what I feel, people will abandon me, or I don't deserve things that I have in life, or so it can be very extreme stances on this. So with all of these 5 themes that I had, the 5 problems that I have, I will put my theory A. And theory A is based on my actions over the last few months, based on my reactions to things, based on the things that I've done and the things that I haven't done, based on the ways that I have felt. What do I actually believe about myself? And this will go in my theory A column. And this tends to be awful, awful stuff. It tends to be really, really terrible stuff. And I will just go into detail that if this happens, that happens. These are, what are my beliefs about myself? What are my core beliefs that I am subconsciously functioning under? And then after I've done this, I will go into part 2 of this, which is, what is my evidence for this? So what is my evidence, for example, that I am unworthy? And this can be the fact that someone has said this to me in the past. This can be the fact that multiple people may have said this to me in the past. This can be the fact that I have interpreted something happening to me in life to mean that I am unworthy. This can be the fact that I believe that if I do this thing, then people will abandon me. So this will be all the evidence that I can find in my life that affirms this belief. And I will leave this there. Then I'll go on to theory B. So theory B is, okay, we said that we're unworthy, for example. What is an alternative explanation here? So theory B tends to be the more realistic, down-to-earth, reasonable explanation. So something along the lines of, you know, we all have good and bad in us, and we all deserve happiness. For example, this is super vague. It doesn't tend to be things like this. I just don't want to open up specifically about what mine are. But it will be something along these lines, where I'll go into detail that if people are all worthy, or something along the lines of if you are honest and open with people, they will not abandon you, or if you express your needs in the long term, it means that people will stick around, the right people will stick around, or if you express your needs explicitly in the long term, it will mean that the right people will stick around, and it will be this kind of theory B kind of thing, which is counter to theory A and more realistic. And then, this is the fun part, I will go into my life to look for evidence for theory B. And this is something that naturally I would never do, because I'm very much, I find it a lot easier to find evidence for negative things than I find evidence for positive things. But if I try, and this is why I love this exercise, because it gives me the space to go, okay, let's consider for a moment that I'm not the worst person on earth. What is the evidence for this? And then I can go, oh, you know, my friend said that I was a wonderful person last week, or I'm possibly not stupid because I got this promotion at work, or I actually did very well in my exam, and it's highly unlikely that I'm going to completely fail and everything is going to be a disaster because I have this proof. So it tends to be realistic things in my life that affirm theory B. So once I have this balance of theory A, this is the assumption under which I'm functioning, which is really, really horrible. And I admit that I have this evidence that I've gathered from my life that makes it true. But what if this theory B, so the opposite of this, or something more neutral was true? And actually, I have a lot of evidence for this too. And because theory B tends to be very, very rational, its evidence tends to be a lot longer and a lot more reasonable. So when I look at things this way, I can go, actually, I think I'm being ridiculous, and obviously theory A is not true. There are some theory A's that I have still not let go of, even after years and years of doing this exercise. I have some core beliefs that are just so difficult, and I do this exercise again and again for them, and you know, sometimes for a second I feel as though I've just let go of this terrible thing, but then no, it's not true. But anyways, so I will see that theory B is kind of true, and then that will lead me to my action plan. And the action plan tends to be, what sorts of things can I do now? So how can I change my behavior in such a way that reflects that theory B is true? So that could be, for example, if I think I'm completely unworthy on one end, and that is because two people have abandoned me, and a third person has told me that I'm completely unworthy, and this is why I have this core belief. On the other hand, I have the belief that I am not unworthy because I have these other friends who have said this other things, and I've got what I deserve for X, Y, Z, and everyone is good and bad. So there is no reason to think that I am more unworthy than the average person. So once I have this theory A, theory B, in the bottom of this, I will then put kind of what are my action points from this? So my action points from this might be things like, let me see what I've done for my action points here. It can be decisions. It can be decisions based on behavior. So it can be, okay, I no longer need to interact with this person, or I can interact with this other person in a different way, or I need to make explicit my needs in this situation. Or it can be actions or things that I can take, and it kind of gives me the confidence and the space to do the right thing, basically, that I would recommend to someone else, because it's a lot easier to believe these terrible things about myself than it is to believe them about other people. So once I'm done with this, I will basically have these kind of tables. So I have a table here, I have the theme at the top, I have theory A, theory B, and then everything in theory A, all the proof for theory A, everything in theory B, all the proof for theory B, and the evidence in the end. And then it kind of helps me, I guess, neutralize a lot of these negative thoughts and get to the point of being a bit more reasonable about them. Once I'm done with this, it kind of helps things, but it doesn't let go of all my anxiety. So then I go back to saying, what are things that make me feel as though I'm being punched in the guts? And I really like this question. I use it again, and it kind of resurfaces either the things that I have already dealt with, or new things that are just giving me anxiety, that are small things. And then I'll think, okay, is there any need here that is not being met? So I do like to do a needs list too, and a needs list goes through the things that I need at the moment to make myself feel better. And it's kind of like sitting myself down and explicitly saying, okay, what do you need right now? And sometimes I have a need to be less lonely. So that means a need for love, or a need for affection, or a need for space, a need for peace, a need for time off. a need for doing things that I enjoy. So I'll put the list of my needs, and then I will put a list of the needs that have to do with other people that I haven't expressed, because this tends to be quite long for me. I find it really difficult to verbally express my needs, which I think is one of my biggest issues. So at the end of this exercise, I have an action plan of people that I need to express needs to, and people with whom I need to be a bit more explicit in my life. So that's also done. And then in the end of it, I will do 2 other lists. And sorry, I just love my lists, and I love structuring things like this. I love breaking down kind of the mess into very concrete things. And in the end of this thing, I will do the bad things that have happened to me since I've done this exercise, and also good things that have happened to me since I've done this exercise. And I do this because for the bad things, I can kind of look back on them and go, what kind of wrong conclusions can I come to based on this event? So let's say I was rejected over something. Will I have internalized then the thought that I'm not worthy? Or will I have internalized the thought that I don't deserve good things? Or will I then have internalized the thought that I am ugly or stupid or unlikable or unlovable? And I will kind of check that conclusion. So I will write that conclusion down. And then I'll have the list of these negative beliefs, and some of them will be the same as my theory A's. There'll be negative things that I dealt with already, but then I just kind of resurface them and go, okay, I realize that I've gathered evidence for these terrible things over the last few months. Can we just acknowledge now that this isn't true? And on the other hand, this is the part that kind of takes me the most time, is going through the positive things that have happened through the last few months, because genuinely, I have such a negative bias when it comes to events in my life. And so I find it sometimes difficult to remember the good things, but since I've been doing this exercise, I've become much better at this. So we'll go through positive things that have happened. Might be a promotion, it might be something nice that a friend said to me, it might be something, a situation where I felt really good, or something that just made me feel great about myself, and I will write these down, and then I will see, these will usually fit into some theory Bs, so give me evidence to the contrary of the negative things that I tend to think about myself. So yeah, after that, basically I will then look at all of my action points together, and I will create one master list of action points, which I already have now. And this will be a combination of my action points for the activities that I wanted to sort out, and an action point for the moving myself from functioning under theory A and doing all these horrible, toxic, not productive things, to moving more towards theory B, which is a more neutral, a more objective, a more not self-hating version of Elizabeth. So then I will kind of work through that, and send that. So then I will kind of work through that list of things to do, and it kind of gives me the structure in my mind that I have an action plan and I know what I'm going to do. And then that is almost everything. The last thing that I do is write a list of things that make me happy, the things that I do to make me happy. So for example, exercise, especially when I go to the gym and I'm on a call with Sane, this tends to be a very happy activity for me. Going to the movies with my friends, or watching a movie with a friend, having good food, having meeting new people, kind of creating new connections, especially when I meet someone for the first time. That tends to be really, really nice. When I meet very old friends, or when I meet new people for the very first time, that tends to be really, really nice. Kind of stretching. I just love stretching. It just puts me in such a good mindset, and I haven't done it for like almost 2-3 weeks now, which is completely bizarre. Creating videos and content that I do enjoy, listening to podcasts, especially listening to podcasts while I'm going on a long walk. I haven't done this basically since I was last in Finland, so a very long time ago. Reading books, especially non-fiction. So I've been reading Virginia Woolf's book, this kind of getaway Alex Biffy, just so amazing. So reading more books like that, reading more philosophy, rereading books, which I love to do, and sometimes I don't like myself because I feel like it's unproductive. So I'm really, this month I've just been allowing myself to reread old books again and again, and it feels amazing. And kind of being like honest and being around people that I enjoy, and especially touching people that I love and people that I love enjoy. I just love like cuddling, and physical touch just makes me feel really, really great. So this is kind of the list of things that make me feel good, and I think refreshing this in my mind and going, okay, I want to do more of this will make me feel better. So yes, and also I've decided to potentially take some more time off and structure and have a bit more boundaries around how I spend my time. And especially when it comes to work, not going always like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that at any time of the day, any day of the week, but rather creating some more boundaries around potentially having one day off a week would be great. But yes, so that was basically everything. So yes, that was basically everything. I am going to wrap this video up here potentially. I don't know if I'll have a bit of footage maybe tomorrow. But yeah, this was it. This has felt great. I really enjoyed not being in my bed at home because I spent way too much time there, especially with the kind of the recent few weeks. Just I've basically been in bed mostly, and I was really sick of my room. So it's great that I had this break somewhere else, and I feel really, really privileged and great for being able to actually do this at all. So yeah, if you made it so far, honestly, thanks. This is a very, very random video, so I hope it was helpful at all, and I hope it clarified a bit what I tend to do and how I do CBT on myself, basically to try to change my core beliefs, and which is basically what this is functioning under beliefs that are potentially not true and that I'm not even realizing that I'm doing. So yeah, that was everything. Sorry for the audio on this video because I don't have a microphone with me. I forgot it. So I'm recording on my camera, which I never do. So the audio might be atrocious. Otherwise, thank you so much for spending this time with me as always. I'm going to go and take a nice long bath and yeah, and go home tomorrow. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and good luck. Let me know how this goes if you do try it out and if it helps at all. Please go to therapy if you can. If you can get therapy and if you can afford it, just do it. It's the best thing on earth. It's been one of the most life-changing things for me, and I could not recommend it more. So yeah, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Be kind to yourself and others, and don't believe everything you think. Thanks. Bye.